Greetings and welcome to our daily Devo for Thursday, May the 2nd today. Our devotion today is entitled The Feast of Freedom. The author is Jurgen Moltmann. He's a German Protestant theologian, and he starts out with a short poem, haiku. I'm not sure what you would call it. It's by somebody by the name of Julia Esquivel. I live each day to kill death. I die each day to beget life. And in this dying unto death, I die 1,000 times and am reborn another 1,000 through that love. The Easter faith recognizes that the raising of the crucified Christ from the dead provides the great alternative to this world of death. This faith sees the raising of Christ as God's protest against death and against all the people who work for death. For the Easter faith recognizes God's passion for the life of the person who is threatened by death and with death. And faith participates in this process of love by getting up and out of the apathy of misery and out of the cynicism of prosperity and fighting against death's accomplices here and now in this life. Weary Christians have often enough deleted this critical and liberating power from Easter. Their faith has been degenerated into the confident belief in certain facts and a poverty-stricken hope for the next world, as if death were nothing but a fate we meet with at the end of life. But death is an evil power now, in life's very midst. It is the economic death of the person we allow to starve, the political death of the people who are oppressed, the social death of the handicapped, the noisy death that strikes through napalm bombs and torture, and the soundless death of the apathetic soul. The resurrection faith does not prove true by means of historical evidence or only in the next world. It is proved here and now through the courage for revolt, the protest against deadly powers, and the self-giving of men and women for the victory of life. It is impossible to talk convincingly about Christ's resurrection without participating in the movement of the Spirit who descends on all flesh to quicken it. This movement of the Spirit is the divine liberation movement, for it is the process whereby the world is recreated. So resurrection means rebirth out of impotence and indolence to the living hope. And today, living hope means a passion for life and a lived protest against death. Christ's resurrection is the beginning of God's rebellion. That rebellion is still going on in the spirit of hope and will be complete when, together with death, every rule and every power and every authority is at last abolished. A reference to 1 Corinthians 15:24. The resurrection hope finds living expression in men and women when they protest against death and the slaves of death. But it lives from something different, from the superabundance of God's future. Its freedom lives in resistance against all the outward and inward denials of life. But it does not live from this protest. It lives from joy in the coming victory of life. Protest and resistance are founded on this hope. Otherwise, they degenerate into mere accusation and campaigns of revenge. But the greater hope the greater hope, has to take living form in this protest and resistance. Otherwise, it turns into religious seduction. Easter is a feast, and it is as the feast of freedom that it is celebrated. For with Easter begins the laughter of the redeemed, the dance of the liberated, and the creative play of fantasy. From time immemorial, Easter hymns have celebrated the victory of life by laughing at death, mocking at hell, and ridiculing the mighty ones who spread fear and terror around them. Easter is the feast of freedom. It makes the life which it touches a festal life. The risen Christ makes life a perpetual feast, said Athanasius. But can the whole of life really be a feast? Even life's dark side, death, guilt, senseless suffering? I think it can. Once we realize that the giver of this feast is the outcast, suffering, crucified Son of Man from Nazareth, then every no is absorbed into this profound yes and is swallowed up in its victory. Oh, grave, where is your victory? Easter is at one and the same time God's protest against death and the feast of freedom from death. Anyone who fails to hold these two things together has failed to understand the resurrection of the Christ who was crucified. Resistance is the protest of those who hope, and hope is the feast of the people who resist. Really appreciate that one today. The fact that Christ is risen from the dead is not just a fact. It's life, it's hope. It's where the fruit of the Spirit flows from: love, joy, peace, patience, all those things that we are given. And they could not be given if Christ had first not conquered death. In the crucifixion and in the resurrection, Jesus says, I was dead, but I am now alive. And I now hold the keys to death and hell. Freedom for us, liberty for us, joy for us. We no longer have to live under the guilt of our brokenness and fallenness and inability, as Paul wrote in Romans 7, the things I know I should do, I don't do. And the things I don't do, I find myself doing. Oh, wretched man that I am. This reality of a living Christ and the salvation that's been given to us through him, that frees us from that guilt, frees us from being that wretched person. Oh, live in the joy of the resurrection. Live in the joy that we are no longer in bondage to sin. He breaks the power of canceled sin. He sets the prisoner free. His blood availed for me. His blood avails for you too. Blessings to you today. Live in the joy of knowing that we serve a risen Savior, and that risen Savior has promised that he will be with us to the very end of the age. Blessings.